Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast episode number 82. I'm your host, Dan Matson, aka Wooden Boat Dan. If he can't do it, well, he'll probably just keep trying to get it done. And this is the world's first podcast fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, tradition, and romance of wooden vessels all around the world. Welcome to the podcast today. It's great to have you on board. This podcast is all about getting in the wooden boat game. If you're not already in, it's high time you get in. Lots of ways to do that. And listening to this podcast is one way to get inspired and get ideas, and then you can go out and build a boat or buy a boat or rent a boat or go to a wooden boat festival or just buy Wooden Boat magazine. Have some fun with it. Today's featured segment is with Jeff Carson and Chris Wallace. Jeff and Chris live on a beautiful 65-foot motor boat that used to be used by the British Columbia Forest Service, built in the early 1900s. They live aboard this boat. Chris is also the port captain of the wooden schooner Zodiac that was built in 1924. And I had the chance to hook up with them this past weekend on the Zodiac. And so this first interview with them is going to be about their kind of personal wooden boat journey and some fun details about the boat they live on and some other boats that they're working on. So stay tuned for that interview. I expect to have my shop put together this week. I'm actually taking a couple days off work to work on it, which brings me to Wooden Boat hack number 20, which is build a clean room in 4 hours. Okay, so you've got a shop space, and let's assume it's large enough so that you could break off and have a separate room for painting and varnishing your boats, and just having a clean area to work from, doing other projects also. So that was the case with me. We moved into a home with a 3-car garage, and I wanted to keep one bay of the garage where we could park our car, keep it clean, and also where I could drag my canoe in when I do finish varnishing it here in the next few weeks. So I kind of brainstormed and came up with an idea to build a partition in the garage and make it very basic. And I did build it in about 4 hours. And basically, the way I constructed it, it's a 2x4 framed wall. And I put the studs at 32 inches on center instead of the standard 16 inches. So I built the wall in sections because I didn't want to have to heft up a wall that was 19 or 20 feet long by myself and get it between the garage door opener tracks, or the garage door tracks. So I built a 16-foot wall first, and like I say, I used the 32-inch spacing on center for the studs, and I got that up. Then I built a second wall to fill in the gap of about, another 3 feet. And then I actually built a third pony wall, which is a short wall that goes up underneath a cabinet, because there's actually cabinets built onto the wall of the garage. And so my clean room wall goes around those cabinets. So anyway, I got the wall all up, and then I framed in a space for a door that I'd gotten from a recycled place, 30-inch door, and I got that hung. And then I took just a standard blue or green tarp that you buy down at the local hardware store, and it was a 16 by 12, and my wall was about 20 by 9. So I was able to stretch that tarp out over that first 16-foot section that I had built. So I put screws in the top of my top plate above the studs, hung the tarp there, stretch it out nice and tight, snug but not too tight. I didn't want it to be prone to tearing. So I put screws in all the grommets, and then I went back with my staple gun and stapled it to the studs, cut off the bottom of the tarp at the floor level, and then stapled the whole thing on, and it came out awesome. And then I took the excess tarp that I had and went around the door that I'd created and underneath the cabinet in the smaller space. So now I've got basically, what I've got left to do is above the wall, there's about a 2-inch gap to the ceiling, which I purposely left because I've built walls too tight before, and then you can't get them up. Plus the fact that in my garage, the floor slopes about a 1/4 inch per foot to drain water out of, which is pretty standard for a concrete slab. So I've got this gap at the top, and now I'm going to come back with some scrap wood I have and just put a block over the top of the wall, not over the top, over the face of the wall up to the ceiling to seal that portion. So now what I've got is I've got a 3-car garage. It's got 2 rooms in it. One of the rooms is probably about 24 by 20, and the other one is probably about 15 by 20. So now I've got a door in between the rooms so I can go into my garage, go through the door, go into my workshop, then I can come back through the door and into my clean room. I can park my car in there at night. When I get ready to varnish, I'll be good to go. So I built this wall in about 4 hours. You can do it too. I'm going to put a couple pictures on the website. I can leave it there for a long time, or I can take it down if I need to at some point. The other nice thing about it, with the studs, I can mount things to it, like a shelving and stuff like that. I did secure the wall on the ceiling, against the ceiling, and also on the walls at the end, so it is a very secure space. So anyway, it's a pretty cool deal. I used mostly recycled material, that either stuff I had or things I was able to locate. And I'm also probably going to put a window in it too, where I will frame a window in, staple my tarp around the frame, cut out the tarp, and place my window in there so I can see through my garage. And I've been doing this all for, in my case, probably less than $30. So it's pretty cool. So that was really fun building that. And that is Wooden Boat Hack number 20, Build a Clean Room in 4 hours. If you go to the podcast show notes today, I'll have some more notes about how to do that and some photographs. So I hope you enjoy that. I would like to give a shout out to our new e-newsletter subscribers this week: Paul Ricketts, Jeff Ferguson, Kyle Strumer, and Roger Curtis. Welcome to the podcast newsletter, guys. Great to have you on board. For those of you listening, if you haven't subscribed, I send out a monthly electronic newsletter. Just give you updates on what I'm up to. I'll attach videos and links to fun stuff, and it's a way for me to connect with you. If you go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe and give me your first and last name and your email address, then you will be good to go. So I would encourage you to do that if you haven't already. As far as upcoming events, I mentioned last week on the podcast, and I'll mention again this week, that April 13th and 20th, 2013, Jay Smith, who is a Nordic boat builder extraordinaire, is holding a Nordic lapstake construction class at his boat shop in Anacortes, Washington. Class runs from 8 to 5, costs $140, and includes lunch. It's a great deal. If you can make it, I would connect with Jay, and you can do that by emailing him at Aspoya Boats, which is ASPOYA Boats at Hughes, HUGHES.net. So Jay's an expert builder. If you go to hookedonwoodenboats/007, you can listen to an interview I did with Jay. He studied in Norway, and the guy really knows what he's doing, so I would encourage you to check that out. Okay, we're going to move on to the interview with Jeff and Chris. Taped this on the Schooner Zodiac, which is really a blast. The schooner's 160 feet sparred length, 127 on deck, has a 128-foot mainmast, built in 1924 by William Hand. So anyway, here is the interview with Jeff and Chris. Hope you enjoy it. Okay, it is April 5th still. It's our second recording today.
Third cup of coffee.
Third cup of coffee with Jeff Carson and Chris Wallace. We're sitting on the Zodiac schooner, which we talked about in another podcast, but now we're going to talk more about Jeff and Chris and kind of how they got into the maritime industry and some things like that, your personal boat. So, Jeff, let's start with you. Where are you from originally?
Well, I was born in Sacramento, California, actually. My dad was in the Air Force, so Air Force brat. Mm-hmm. Hopscotched across the country, and he retired from the Air Force in Morgantown, West Virginia, about an hour south of Pittsburgh. And I went to high school there and went to West Virginia University.
Okay.
Got a degree in design and technical theater, so building scenery for theater.
Okay.
And worked in theater professionally until 1998 or 99, all over the country.
Building theater sets and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Building, rigging, did touring, a whole bunch of stuff. It was always fun because theatrical carpentry is vastly different from almost any other kind, because you have to build something that can withstand the rigors of a show. It's got to move and lift it up and down or whatever, but it also has to look weird. The designer, there's no basis for reality for a lot of the stuff. It's there's a concept behind it. So you're building things that do very complex things and yet have to look very specific while they're doing it. So it's fun carpentry. I really enjoyed it a lot.
Did you do any boating as a kid, Jeff?
No, actually, I'd always wanted to, but it wasn't until I moved out to Seattle that I started boating. I'd been buying Wooden Boat magazine for years, living in Colorado and on the East Coast, but had never really had a chance to do anything about it.
So you did the theatrical carpentry, mm-hmm. and that was kind of, you were moving around with that?
All over the country, progressively working back west, kind of with a goal of getting up to the Northwest. I don't know why, just wanted to come up here. And was working at the Seattle Repertory Theater, and that's where I met Chris. She was a scenic artist at the theater.
Oh.
And about that time we ended up getting a house after we got married, and I needed, you can make good money in theater, but if you want to have a house and take care of a family, you have to work really, really hard. And I realized that the hours, working the late nights and all of that wasn't really conducive to a family. So I started to transition into cabinetry and remodel contracting and stuff like that.
For residential stuff?
Yeah, residential mostly. A little bit of commercial stuff here and there.
Had you started getting into boating yet at that point?
Dabbling in it. I had a couple of friends that had some sailboats, and I'd go out with them every opportunity, and then kind of poking around. But then when we started our business, that sucked up all of our time, and it wasn't really until we found Zodiac that we were able to really start spending some time boating. I mean, we got the first boat. I don't know, 99. No, it would have even been earlier than that. It was shortly after Juliet was born. And then the second boat, the ketch that we were talking about, had that, but it just sat down at Fisherman's Terminal while I slowly rebuilt parts of it. But never really had the time to take them out and do anything. We were so busy.
Yeah. So what was the business you had in Seattle?
Oh, that was Chris's business that we had started. I'll let her actually talk about that.
Sure. Okay, so that takes us up into like mid-2000s, something like that. 2005 or whatever. Okay. So how about you, Chris? Where are you from originally?
I'm a Northwest girl from Oregon, down in Corvallis.
Okay.
Grew up down there in a theater family. My dad's a professional set designer and was a professor at Oregon State University in theater. So I grew up also working production theater. He got me scene painting, I think, at age 12, just so he had slave labor.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And learned from him. He'd learned from the masters who'd written the books about it. So I was learning all of these old school techniques on how to blend paint and things like that out of animal glue and pigments. And decided when I went to get my degree that I didn't want to follow exactly behind my dad, because he had quite a reputation. So I switched and became a costume designer instead of a set designer. So I majored in costume design and art history and worked professionally for a number of years, and then moved up to Seattle and worked at the Seattle Repertory Theater as an over-hire scenic artist.
Did you ever do any acting when in part of the theater?
No, I think when you're production, you scoff at the people that are
Really?
in front of the curtain.
They're important and valuable. You wouldn't have a job without
Yeah.
them. But
That's
we have
like
our
the other
roles.
side of
It's
this.
the reason
The
we
dark
exist.
side of it.
Yeah. We have many friends who are actors, though.
Really? Yeah, I bet.
We like them in spite of it.
Yeah. So how did you get from Corvallis then to? Or let me ask you this: Did you do boating as a kid?
No, actually, when Jeff and I started dating, we needed a place to hang out for the summer. We were going to live together, and his friend Michael Wellborn was a lighting designer and had left town for a gig in the summer, so we stayed on his boat. And I just thought it was a romantic thing to do, but I didn't realize he was actually checking to make sure that I could handle life on board a boat. He had plans for me, and he wanted to make sure I could handle liveaboard life.
Jeff did.
Yeah, he didn't tell me that.
I had plans my goal for years had been to get a boat and go cruising. That's really what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it was finding a person who would go cruising with me. So
Fortunately, if you're a theater person, I think you have a gypsy type of personality, so
Yeah.
it worked out fine.
So what was that boat that you lived on?
It was a 32-foot Newport 32.
I want to say it was a 36
Okay.
Newport 36.
Which is a
Worked
sloop?
out well.
Yeah.
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 So you lived on that for a while.
And
Did you take her out and sail her?
we went out with her. We didn't do a lot of sailing, and then eventually he got our little catch. Most of the sailing that I've done has been on Zodiac, and because Tim taught me on this boat, when it was time to get on our little boat, in fact, people still roll their eyes when I say we have a little boat. It's 40 feet. But to me, it's a little boat. And Jeff would get so irritated because I'd get on it and I'd be like, look, the lines are so small. It's like a toy. I still tend to do that occasionally.
Yeah.
So, most of my training was on the Zodiac. As a
So how did you
sailor.
get hooked up with the Zodiac originally?
Because we got on board during a day sail in 2006. And they really, from the...
She was down at Lake Union.
She was down at Lake Union.
Yeah.
And Jeff was hauling on lines and doing a good job, and they really eyed him quickly as a possible volunteer, so they recruited us heavily, and I kind of came with him. And then after several seasons and eventually volunteering and eventually moving on board during the winter up here, Tim recruited me, Tim and our former mate recruited me to consider being the replacement first mate when E.T. went back to school. And it took a while to convince me because I knew that my sailing was not, I didn't have the experience that some of the older guys did.
Yeah.
And Tim says, well, I can teach anybody to sail in 2 weeks. I need someone who has the management experience and the can handle the personnel and the organization of running a ship like this. And because I'd had the business in Seattle prior to that, I'd had 35 staff members that I worked.
I always like the fact that most people start sailing on a dinghy or a small boat and gradually work their way up.
Yeah.
I love the fact that she learned and got her license and everything on Zodiac,
160
and then
foot
scaled all that
schooner.
knowledge
Yeah, it
back
took a
down.
little bit
it
of
was the
learning
hardest
to
way to
get
learn
onto
how
our
to
smaller
sail you
boat.
could possibly do, and she managed to pull it off. So
Yeah, much harder to go from a boat this size to a small boat than the other
Well,
way. Is that what you're saying?
I would say that
much
the
harder.
sailing theory was harder for me to grasp at first because this boat requires so much, the Zodiac requires so much wind to get her to really respond quickly. Otherwise the tacks can be sometimes a little slower. And so when you're working sails on this boat, unless it's just a tack, 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 which occasionally we'll do, what you're learning is how to handle lines and how to make your particular sail do whatever the command is. But you don't really grasp the theory behind, beating into wind or whatever it is you need to do on this boat unless you've got a lot of wind and you're doing some short tacks. It's more of a theory you have to kind of get. And Tim told me that as I was fighting through it. He's like, this is not the boat for you to learn how to, the theory of sailing. You need to go back and handle a dinghy and put her down a couple times.
Feel the boat
Yeah.
move like you do on a small boat.
So when we get on our catch, it's a completely different thing. And now as we're driving around on our motor vessel that we live on, Jeff is always laughing at me because when I'm taking the helm, and I usually take it out, or once we're out, I take control. I'm constantly doing Zodiac things. We have a 16-foot draft on this schooner. I'm not going to get too close to the shore on our 65-foot boat because I'm used to no, you don't get too close to the shore when you have 16 feet under the water. And our boat has 6 feet.
Keep telling her, no, you can actually take that mark on the starboard side.
No. Never do that.
You don't need 45 feet of water.
Yeah. Right. So can you accidentally jibe on a 160-foot schooner?
Yeah, you just don't want to.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, with all the gear that's up there and the gaff and everything like that. The rule rule number 1 is never jibe. Rule number 2 is see rule number 1.
Really? So never jibe on this boat?
We say that, and then on special occasions with very little wind, under controlled circumstances, we will jibe it, but we don't like to.
So you'll fall off and come through full circle.
Exactly.
But
we've both seen it on board where we'll get backwinded accidentally or something, and the preventers are doing their job. Keeps from sweeping the deck. So
really?
Oh yeah.
When you've got a sail that goes up 100 feet. The preventers can stop the boom from sweeping the deck, but that gaff up there that weighs 500 pounds and all of the gear with it, it still gets swung around.
Oh, right.
And it's not the size of the boat at the waterline that's intimidating. It's the amount of heavy gear above our heads that keep us always conscious of not wanting to jibe or something like that.
Yeah, right.
So definitely a tough place and way to learn to sail. Great for teamwork, great for confidence building, all of that. But just learning the basic mechanics and theory of sailing, she chose the hard route.
Yeah, right. I learned to sail on like a 12-foot sloop in a lake in Missouri. First time I roommate, I capsized. It's like, okay, let's do something different here.
Yep.
Well, my body weight does matter where I'm at in this boat.
That's actually where we're looking forward to a little bit of day sailing with this Lightning, or maybe Juliet and the yacht club and their laser fleet. Just getting her on a small boat so she really gets the mechanics. I mean, she's good at what she does. She knows it all, but stick
your daughter Juliet, you're talking about? Yeah, she's 14.
Yeah,
she was 8 when she started on this boat, and one of the first trips out, we were in Rosario and got a sudden gust that we did not expect. Usually, when we know there's going to be wind, the mate will come down and warn the cook and whatnot. And I was in the galley with my daughter, and we just got a big gust that put her over. And when the Zodiac heels over dramatically, it's like a house heeling over.
Yeah.
And it was a bit more dramatic than even I expected. Things were flying everywhere and stuff like that.
Really?
That normally would have been, battened down had we thought we were going to be doing that. So Juliet got a big taste real quick of what it's like when a boat heels over. And for a while, because that was her only reference, she was intimidated about heeling over, period, even on a smaller boat.
Yeah.
But now that she's gotten more time on our small boat and more experience on the Zodiac, and when we reballast the boat, she understands now ballast versus sail area and stability and things like that.
Right. So let's go back to, so you guys are living on a 65-foot motor yacht. Is that what you'd call it? Yeah. So when did you get that boat?
Go ahead.
Kwaietek, is that
the day we got Kwaietek was the day that the Zodiac was dismasted. And Kwaietek was the boat that rescued the passengers off of Zodiac.
Really?
Yeah. We when we closed the business, we were kind of casting around for what to do. You kind of feel lost and like a little bit of a failure, and it was no fault of our own. But through the course of a couple of conversations, we kind of said, well, all right, let's take our lives in a completely different direction. Let's get a boat and live aboard. And I was surprised that Chris went for it and very pleased. We looked and tried to find the boat. You know, we knew we wanted an old boat with character, and we knew we wanted a wood boat because we're stupid. And we had looked at a bunch of boats and finally found this one up on the Fraser River. It had been in forestry service with British Columbia Columbian Forestry Division up until 1972. And then in private ownership after that.
Was it pulling logs or?
No, they would actually take survey crews up the Inside Passage, and they would survey forestry plots, and then they would take what they called inventory crews, and these guys would literally walk through the forest and inventory the types of trees and the size and all of that, so they knew what they had up there.
They'd built her for the headquarters launch.
Yeah.
In 23 and used her up until the late 30s as the hauling the top brass of the Forest Service around. They'd take 7 rangers and a cook and a captain up for several weeks, up to 2 months at a time. By the time she was retired, up into Desolation Sound to do surveys and things. So
she was built in 23. So.
Mm-hmm.
Built in 23, rebuilt again in 36, and actually lengthened at that time. She was originally built at 55 feet and lengthened to 63. And when they lengthened her, they reconfigured the deck houses and put the Gardner 6L3 engine that's in her right now. That went in 36. I don't even know how many operating hours.
So they lengthened the stern, obviously.
Right in the middle of the boat.
Oh.
Yeah, you can. I've heard anecdotal stories about an accident and a cracked keel. Nothing documenting anything. So, but you can stand on the dock and look down the boat, and you can see nice sweet lines, and then there's just a flat spot, middle. 8 feet flat spot right in the middle of the hull.
Why did they lengthen?
So,
stateroom area or something?
No, it was where the engine room actually was. And one of the things I do know is when it was built, it had a gasoline engine in it, a little small gasoline engine. And then when they lengthened it, they put the Gardner diesel in. It's a big engine. The engine alone is 8 feet long with the reverse gear and everything.
Wow.
It's fun when we go to these Forest Service rendezvous, the vessel rendezvous. Or last year they were having their centennial in Victoria and invited all the old rangers to come down and see their old boats.
Oh.
There were 12 Forest Service vessel boats that were now privately owned there for display. And we got rangers on there, some of them that were so old they had a hard time getting up, across the gangway. They'd go down in that engine room and just wax poetic for... I lost Jeff for hours at a time with those guys. They just loved that engine. They loved Granny Gardner.
We had one gentleman who had on board last year who had been in the Forestry Service and served on the boat in 1949 and still remembered it like it was yesterday. It was. Wow. I mean, it's just amazing talking to the guys. They'll come on board.
So it had the same engine as one.
Same engine, yeah. So
is that a real low RPM with a big prop
slow
type
turning,
of thing?
Yeah,
like a tug.
Pretty much. We cruise at about 850 or so.
Oh, okay.
We don't even have a tack on the engine. The only instrument we have is a cooling water temperature gauge and an oil pressure gauge, and that's it. But I've used a portable tack on the crankshaft end, and we idle it somewhere around 400. Maximum speed I like to put it up to is about 850. Mm-hmm. So we'll make 7.5, 8 knots at that.
And she's pretty low, good low burning fuel.
Yeah.
2 gallons an hour.
Really?
Yeah. And the engine.
So do we now with prices the way they are.
Oh yeah. I'd had no experience with an engine of this type before, and I have to say I've just fallen in love with this Gardner engine. I mean, it's slow turning, easy to maintain.
4-cylinder?
6-cylinder.
6-cylinder. How many horse?
100.
100 horse.
Yeah, and as the guys all you start talking with guys who know anything about these engines, and they say they're Clydesdales, they're big horses that are coming out of that engine.
Yeah.
That's measured at the prop.
Oh.
So it's.
It helps too that the Forest Service designed her. She's a very narrow double ender, and that helps with the fuel efficiency.
Oh, she's a double ender.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's a book on all these boats and a chapter devoted to the headquarter launches where they've interviewed the rangers who've been on them and whatnot. And it does say that they do have a tendency to roll. And one of the rangers was quoted as saying, that BC Forester, she'll roll in wet grass. And it's true. We've been out in the straight with
Really? She likes
conditions
to go on her side.
Oh,
I mean, you never
Want to keep
feel
her perpendicular.
you never feel unsafe. You know, she's always going to come back up. You know, it's not a snap roll. It's not, you know, it never feels bad, but she likes to roll.
Yeah.
So
we learned quickly as liveaboards what should not be on a boat like that, what needs to be battened down.
Yeah.
I think our first trip out, we had good-sized waves. We had a French press up there on the dash while we were driving.
Oh.
I think half the time we spent trying to keep things from
Yeah.
careening across the cabin.
Where was that boat built?
it was actually built by the Forestry Service in Thurston Bay, British Columbia.
Okay.
Way up the inside path. Well, not way up, but a ways up towards the north end of Vancouver Island. It was the fourth boat they built for the Forestry Service. And then in the, I want to say early 30s, they shut down the Thurston Bay yard and moved everything down to Vancouver. So for years after that, she was based out of Vancouver. Worked under the name of BC Forester, was the christening name for the boat and what it served under. And then because of its name, for some reason, it's the only boat in the fleet that when it was decommissioned, it was required by law that the new owners couldn't keep the name. So they had to rename that vessel. It's the only boat in the fleet that had to be renamed after it was sold into private ownership.
Really?
But we, since we're U.S. citizens and not Canadian citizens, we're sort of in the process of, it's always gone by both names. It's either been Kwaietek or BC Forester.
Yeah.
And people still refer to it as BC Forester. So we're kind of, interchangeably using both names right now.
What is Kwaietek? Where did that name come
It's
from?
the Salish name, one of the Salish dialects name for seagull.
Oh.
So we like it. It's hard
And
for
Salish is
people
a
to...
Native American tribe.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, in this area.
All up the Salish Sea.
Yeah.
So we're thinking, or what we've heard is it's a North Vancouver Island dialect.
Oh.
Because
okay.
the Lummi Indians down here that are Salish don't understand that word. So
Oh,
I don't
really?
think that's
Interesting.
from our area.
Yeah.
But it's not an easy name when people see it on the boat to pronounce. We had to learn how to say it. But it fits her, as does BC Forester. So, and we've gone through the process of changing the name on our catch from what it was to the name it has now, Sugary, and went through all the
traditions and
superstitions.
superstitions.
We weren't sure we believed them, but it wasn't. We didn't want to be out in a storm and realize, well, we should have perhaps done that one superstition thing. So we kind of like the fact that Kwaietek seems to like to be called BC Forester still, and so we're just making up our own tradition and anthropomorphizing the boat and deciding that she likes being called both.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So she's a plank-on frame boat?
Plank-on frame, built like a small ship. I mean, just rock solid.
Really?
2-inch sided, 3-inch molded frames, oak frames, on 9-inch centers. 2-inch hull planking.
Really? What's the whole material?
Doug fir.
Uh-huh.
Steamed oak frames. Massive keel structure.
lots of chafing gear.
Lots of chafing gear. Fully sheathed at the waterline with ironwood.
Oh, really?
Triple stringers throughout the boat. Massive deck beams and 5-inch square
wanted
deck
to be able
beams.
to bump into stuff occasionally.
That was
Yeah.
our job, was to go up into those little inlets and
Yeah.
get in there. So
Yeah, they didn't-
when we did our
they weren't
sea
screwing
trials,
around.
the owner, we were on the Fraser, and there were some loose logs floating around from the different log barges, and Jeff went to kind of skirt around them as he was driving the boat, and the owner was like, "Oh no, you don't need to worry about that."
Really?
Yeah.
When we got the boat down here to Bellingham, Tim, the captain on Zodiac, came on board to look around. He's very curious about the thing, and he'd seen photos for the months it took to close the deal. And he's looking around, and he just, at one point, he stopped and he said, "This thing was built the most difficult, most complex, most expensive, but right way that you could build a boat like this to do its job." I mean, everything was, it was a government boat, BC Forestry government boat.
Yeah,
they put a ton of money into them. And we've since talked to guys who said that every couple of years, every 2 or 3 years, they'd bring the boats in, they kind of cycle through them, and they'd bring the boats in to over winter, and they'd gut them. They'd empty, if they could get it off the boat, they'd get it off mattresses, cookware, everything would go. They'd air them out, and then all new gear would go back on. And
Wow.
every couple of years they were in for maintenance cycles, and if anything was wrong, they'd fix it.
Really took
And
care
fortunately
of
for us, the previous owner had the boat for 26 years and lived on it for 23. And he had no shortage of money, and if there was anything wrong with it, he fixed it and fixed it the right way. So we inherited a boat that
Really?
structurally was in very good shape.
Yeah.
We've done a bunch of new joiner work and cabinetry and stuff, and, reconfigured it. And one of my favorite parts about it is she's a vintage boat with a great history, but when we got hold of her, the interior had been rebuilt over the years, so we weren't trying to preserve a museum piece. We didn't have to replace everything exactly like it
I
was.
see, yeah.
We built things that look good and fit the style of the work. It's a workboat style,
Yeah.
but also fit our needs for what we wanted to do and how we were living on the boat. So
Well, that's kind of nice.
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
like you're in
It's
a
a very,
museum.
very homey boat. Very
Yeah.
cozy.
yeah, we get when we do the boat shows or have people on board. One of the most common comments we hear is that people will come down below and they'll say, I never expected it to feel so much like a home.
Yeah.
And it really does. I mean, it's got all of our stuff on board.
Yeah.
It's home, and it feels like a home down below.
So do you guys have a bunch of storage lockers on land where you're storing stuff?
Just one.
Just one? That's not bad.
It was a huge thing. We had
Yeah.
5 kids and 2 dogs, and we lived in a 4,000 square foot craftsman house in Seattle.
Oh,
And when it was time to move aboard, it was a cleansing period to,
It was.
to
It was.
decide what we wanted and what
Oh
we
my
didn't.
God! We did 19 pickup truck loads of stuff to the Goodwill station before we even really started cleaning out the house.
Really?
Yeah. And fortunately for us, we've got some. My mother has a small vacation house up in British Columbia, up on Denman Island. So our good furniture that we really wanted to keep, we just moved up there.
Oh, nice.
It stays in the family up there.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
And my older kids now are in college and whatnot and are always wanting furniture, so we just keep parting off our old stuff to them.
Yeah.
That's
So
kind of
It
cool.
works.
it worked well.
So how long have you lived on Kwaietek?
2.5 years now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's how long you've owned her then?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the day he brought her down was the day that we were dismasted on Zodiac, and they'd gone up to Jeff and a couple of our other crew members with captain's licenses had gone up to pick her up on the Fraser, and they were bringing her down, and heard on the radio that we'd been dismasted.
Oh.
Yeah, and we were actually.
I read about that.
Yeah.
In your
Yeah,
blog.
we were racing Chris and Tim on Zodiac to see who could get back to the dock first, and whoever got back to the dock first was buying beer. And as we were coming southbound, we kept hearing on VHF 5, Seattle Traffic Station channel. We kept hearing tugboat reports of what appeared to be a schooner dismasted in a drift in Rosario Strait, because nothing had gone out on 16 yet.
Oh.
And we could not for the life of us figure out how tugboat captains were misinterpreting, seeing Zodiac sailing down the strait as dismasted and adrift. And then finally managed to get hold of Chris on the phone, and she said, "Can't talk, we were dismasted." Oh, okay.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
It was kind of weird to see my new home that I was going to be living on as I was standing on what had been my home for 2 years.
Yeah.
That was now in trouble. Yeah.
So where have you taken Kwaietek since you owned her? Have you done some cruising, or not had too much time to, or?
Well, Jeff has been able to take her places while I've been working on Zodiac in the summer, but our goal is to minimize my time during the summer on Zodiac so we can go up the Inside Passage and eventually Alaska. We've taken her to Victoria, we've done the Gulf Islands. We like to go down to Seattle. We were just down there 2 weeks ago.
Oh, really?
It's really nice to be able to go through the Swinomish and into what's that bay? Well, Penn Cove and all of that, because the Zodiac doesn't go in the Saratoga Passage.
Yes.
So we get to go
Swinomish
places.
is, that's through Laclauner?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it was fun.
It was kind of cool because Zodiac was down there coming out of dry dock, and we were up rigging on that Saturday, so we were going to be going down anyways. And Chris said, "Well, rather than drive down, why don't we just take Kwaietek down for the day?" So it's 2 days down and a day down in Seattle and 2 days back up. And, we had the time to do it, and it was a good shakedown cruise for
Gray whales were in
Kwaietek.
Saratoga, so we decided
Again,
to go
beautiful
play.
weather.
Yeah.
And it was we did that a couple of years, right after we got the boat. We were down there for the 4th of July Wooden Boat Festival. And as we were getting ready to pull out, I think it was that one. Anyways, as we were getting ready to go, everybody felt a little awkward that we weren't packing stuff to go down to Seattle. You know, we're going to be down for a couple of days, and suddenly as we're getting underway, we all realized, yeah, we're taking our home. Everything that we have is going with us.
Well, that's kind of nice.
It is. And we've gotten to the point now where we can get everything stowed that, you know, we have out to live on the boat.
Yeah.
Within a half an hour, Juliet knows her routine. So we have this kind of routine where it's like, all right, first you do the cat check to make sure that the cat is not anywhere near the engine when you start the big flywheel.
Yeah.
And then while the engine warms up with that kind of an engine, it's nice to let her sit there for about a half an hour. We just go room by room, and it takes about 20 minutes to get everything that we don't want flying around stowed in its place that we have, and then we're ready to go.
Cool.
So it's nice.
Yeah.
And Juliet's getting really adept at, I mean, she can start the engine. She can, eventually I'm going to have her be the one who takes it in and out of the
You have to
slip.
manually turn the flywheel to get her started?
We've got an electric starter on her, but a good swift kick helps.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So does that engine sound like some of these other tugboat, like Imperial Atlas diesels and that sort of thing?
a little bit faster and a little bit louder.
Okay.
But,
Really? A little bit louder, too?
A little bit louder, but you can
Those are
still...
a little more slower turning, I
Yeah.
think.
It's kind of fun to be out. We have friends that own the David B, and they
Yeah,
have a Washington S-Step.
Yeah.
And it's fun to get, and our boats are the same size.
Yeah.
Fun to get them out there together because they both have that kind of noise, but slightly different. You know, and the old guys certainly can tell you without even seeing the engine what it is by listening to it.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's fun to cruise around with David B.
Yeah.
And it's really, I mean, it's not loud at all. We could talk in the engine room. But
Yeah. Well, it's nice. 2 gallons an hour. It's what, $10 an hour in fuel. That's like...
we can actually afford to go places, which is one of the things, you know, we'd looked at, God, Chris can tell you how many boats and had all the reasons for ruling them out. But one of the things was the fuel economy, the fact that, you know, we're not swinging twin 671s or something. And, you know,
Yeah.
we can actually pay to go places. You know, a lot of the boats we'd looked at would end up sitting at the dock because we just couldn't afford to turn the engine on.
What's the what size prop does that boat have?
34 inch,
Okay.
3-bladed wheel.
That's a big prop.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
Yeah. So is that how is that boat to maneuver in a moorage area? It's got to be challenging with single screw. I'm sure there's no bow thrusters or anything fancy.
Full keel, no bow thruster.
A lot of windage.
She's
lot of windage.
7 feet of freeboard at the bow, so a huge amount of sail area. And in fact, we'd gone to Susha, Echo Bay, over Easter weekend, and coming back in, there was a little more wind in Bellingham than I thought there was going to be. And it was a fight to bring the boat around into the wind in the marina. It was a little bit of work. So we've learned that there are places that you don't take it into. We have no business being in there.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes if it's too windy, we just take an available slip and wait till the next day or whatever.
Yeah.
And fortunately for us, our nature is more to spend time on the hook. So you know, we rarely go into marinas unless we absolutely need to.
Cool.
So
yeah. Cool. What size anchor do you have with the boat?
220 pound stockless on 1/2-inch triple B chain.
Oh,
we don't go.
wow.
I mean, we were sitting outside of Port Townsend one afternoon in 30-knot winds, and you know the boat rides around. She roots around on the hook, but other than that, we weren't going anywhere.
Electric.
Hydraulic winch.
Hydraulic winch.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Is that original?
It's not original. It was put in at some point during the forestry years. But it's not in. We've got a great collection of vintage photos that the Forestry Service took documenting the boat.
Yeah.
So it went in sometime after 46, but it works like a champ. Disassembled it and checked everything, lubed it, put it all back together.
Yeah.
Works perfectly every time.
Yeah. So for people that are listening that are thinking about purchasing a wooden boat, tell us the bright side of doing that.
Well, you know, I think because first off, we owned 2
Let's not talk
Volkswagen
about
buses.
maintenance.
We owned 2 Volkswagen buses prior to getting boats, and I think the nature of, you know, if you can own a VW and anthropomorphize it, give it a name, then you don't mind throwing money at it when you have to. So that made us easy targets to the wooden boat market. But they have so much more character, and they're so much warmer than fiberglass or especially steel or cement hull boats. And I think we're also drawn to not only the character, but obviously we work on a boat that has a lot of history. Kwaietek had history. It doesn't matter whether they have a name, it's just the stories that revolve around them. So we both are that way, probably because we're theater people. But it's projects that people are so intimidated by wooden boats. It's, just take one project at a time. As Captain Tim says, a wooden boat starts to sink the minute you put it in the water. I mean, that's as long as you embrace that,
Mm-hmm.
and you can start working on one end, and by the time you get to the other end, you're going to have to go back and do it again. But it's all manageable. It's all living products. It's varnish doesn't frighten me, and he's a carpenter, so it's stuff that if you want to take the time, and it's not work to us. I like to spend time improving these boats. And when you do a good job on them, they're gorgeous boats. They're so much prettier, I think, than any piece of fiberglass boat out there.
It seems to me like it's a lot of things, material things. If you stay on top of the maintenance, you're going to prevent a lot of problems.
That's the most important thing.
Take care of things as soon as they need to be taken care of. You don't let it get worse.
Yeah, haul it out every year or every other year, worst case, and just check everything. Yeah. If you find a problem, fix it, man.
Yeah.
He got to spend time learning how to cork with some of the old masters. Down in Anacortes. Tim and several old shipwrights took how big was that boat?
114 foot.
Yeah, and recork. We're corking it. That's a lot. That's a skill that is. You don't have a lot of corkers anymore because there's not a lot of these big old wooden boats anymore.
Right.
So to learn these old skills and be able to apply them to your home, it's the same as. To me, it's no more work than the big old house we had in Seattle. And we don't have to mow a yard.
Yeah, right, yeah.
You don't have to fix the roof. You're just constantly working on the hull.
Yeah, just, a boat, just like anything else, there's two ways of solving problems. Either you develop the skills yourself or you throw money at it. And, some people have the money and don't want to develop the skill. Some like us don't have the money but need to develop the skill.
Yeah, so you learn how to do it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, I appreciate your time today. Any other comments you'd like to make?
Well, I would just hope that somebody who's listening to this and maybe thinking of a life on board a boat, maybe this will heighten their interest a little bit, because it's a wonderful life. I'm so glad we did it, and all of our kids are, so much better for the fact that they're learning these things. It's a way of life that, it works its way into everything you do, from how much water you use to wash your hands because you have a finite amount, to waking up and innately the first thing you do is you check the wind or the tide because your life depends on it. But it's not a thing, you just do it. And I think it connects you so much more to being, the world around you and being aware of things.
Yeah.
That I'm so glad we did it. We go down to Seattle every now and then. We were driving the boat underneath the Aurora Bridge, and we heard the traffic. It was a Friday afternoon, and we both just went, yeah, we made the right decision.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, I like this traffic a lot better.
Yeah, really. Wow.
So, yeah, if anybody's thinking about it, it's definitely worth looking into and talking to people about.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is you meet people that have made the change, or you start talking to people who've transitioned into boats and cruising, and consistently one of the things they'll say is it's intimidating and scary at first. You're paring back and you're trying something that a lot of people don't do, and consistently they also all say it was worth it. It's it's a fantastic way of life.
Two of the families that live on the dock with us have kids that are under 4 years old.
Really?
Yeah. One of them was born living on a boat, on a 30-foot sailboat, and they just bought a new 50-foot schooner.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That is awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time today. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Really
Thank you.
And,
it was a lot of fun.
We'll do it again sometime.
And you'll have to come out and sail with us.
Yeah, I'd like to do that. Thanks a lot.
Cool.
Jeff and Chris, thanks for taking the time to do the interview. Last weekend, it was really fun getting on the Zodiac, meeting you guys, talking shop. I mean, I was there for like 4 hours. It was really fun getting a tour of the boat and just talking about wooden boats and boats in the area and boat captains and ceiling planking. And Oh my goodness. I could have stayed there a couple days. But anyway, I wish the best to you guys, and we'll have an upcoming interview part 2 in a couple weeks. So hope you guys are doing well, and thanks again. If you'd like to connect with me, you can do so by email, dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. If you would like to talk about your boats, if you have questions, comments, you can go to the website, hookedonwoodenboats.com, and leave comments under the show notes, which every Thursday I publish the podcast. I write a blog about the podcast, and I should have pictures on the website, and then there's a comment area there. You can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest if you look for Wooden Boat Dan. If you enjoy the podcast, I'd encourage you to subscribe to it in iTunes, or you can subscribe directly from my website by clicking on the RSS button. And also, if you really like the podcast, go to iTunes and give me a 5-star review. That would be really cool. Last time I checked, I had 27 of those or something like that. So anyway, I hope you have a great week. Again, I encourage you to get into the wooden boat game somehow. It's really a lot of fun, folks. I mean, this tradition in art's been around for a long, long time, and there's a reason that there's still people out there building, buying, and using wooden boats. And it's time for you to find out about that if you haven't already. So I hope you have a great week. Get out on the water, build a boat, buy a boat, rent a boat. Make sure it's wood, 100% wood, not 95%. Well, 95% would probably be okay, but not 5%, okay? Have a great week. This is Wooden Boat Dan, over and out. Keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. God bless. We'll talk again next week.